Good morning, grade 12. Once again from Bloemfontein. Today we are going to do indicators, economic and growth development, and we are going to do the indicators. An indicator, you know self. What is an indicator? Indicator is showing us a direction, giving us information. The first economic indicator that we have, or the first indicator, we are going to do economic indicators and social indicators. You know that economic indicators has to do with statistics, showing us the trend of the economy, showing us where the economy is going. It is also predicting a future performance of the economy. If we look at economic indicators, there are a few of them. Now, if you try to remember them, just try to remember the objectives of the government. Remember, we have 5 objectives of the government. The first one is economic growth, which is very important. Second one is full employment. Then we have price stability or inflation. Then we have the stability of the currency. And the last one is economic equity. Now, if we look at our economic indicators, where does these statistics come from? Where does we as South Africans get our statistics? We get it from Stats South Africa and quarterly information from the South African Reserve Bank. Also, newspapers and financial magazines, which is really important for you as grade 12s now to have available. Right, the first economic objective, first economic indicator that we have is GDP. What is GDP? Yes, I know it's gross domestic product, but you must be able to know this definition. It's the total value of all final goods and services produced within the borders of a country in a specific period of time. Remember, it's domestic. And what is important, why do we look at GDP as an indicator? It can show us whether there was economic growth or not. And what do we say? It's an increase in GDP will cause economic growth, which is our first objective of the government. GDP give us an indication of economic growth. High economic growth is one of the main objectives, as I just said to you. An increase in GDP, remember we have done that last term of the previous chapter that we're doing, is not always the indication that there's economic development. You must always remember that economic growth, an increase, can also mean that there is a rise in prices. And what is a rise in prices? All of you? Inflation. Remember that, ne? It's a continuous increase in the general price level. Grade 12s, you must know this. This is very important. All right. It is important that we work at GDP at constant prices or GDP at real prices. Can you remember what is the definition of GDP? Let's quickly go back. It is the value of all final goods and services produced within the borders of a country. Now, what is economic growth? Economic growth means it is an increase in the production capacity of a country. In other words, the capacity of a country to produce more. Produce more will create more products. More production will create more demand for employment. More demand for employment will create more income for our people. Right. The next one. It is very important, as I said to you, that we should work at GDP at real prices. How do you calculate the per capita? Per capita, what does per capita mean? Per capita means it is the income per person or the increase per person of a country. All right. The next one. What is our next objective? Our next objective is full employment. So is this also an indicator. Employment, what is the employment? Employment is the aim to provide everyone in this country with a job. And that this person can have an income. Now, in South Africa, we have a big unemployment problem. Our unemployment rate is more or less round about 25% in this country. Now, according to our development and the development goals that we had, they wanted to halve the unemployment rate by 2014. That was according to our Millennium Goals. It was not possible, so let us see here, how do you calculate unemployment? You take the number of unemployed people, you multiply it by 100 and you divide it by, what is EAP? Economically active population. In other words, the people that are able to work, the workforce of the country. Right, now what will have a negative impact on our labor market? Slow growth. Remember, our growth rate is supposed to be between 3 and 6% in this country. At the moment, the growth rate is not so high, and that is why there are relatively low employment at the moment. A drop in the rate of capital formation. In other words, what is capital formation? Make your stock of capital more. And then a very important one, oversupply of unskilled labor. People that are not trained, that don't have enough education for the requirements of the labor market. Then immigration of skilled labor. This is also one of the most important ones here. Remember that we call that in the lower grades, we say it is brain drain. What does brain drain mean? It is people that were studying in the country, that were educated in the country, and then they leave the country going to another country to go and work there. And then the structuring of the economy can also cause that the economy, the labor market is impacted negatively. Right. What else? Relatively high wages compared to the production, and that cause then inflation. The labor legislation, the labor laws in the country can also cause that people are unemployed. And then, very important, as we also experienced the last few months, the influences of the unions. And then it can lead to labor unrest and strikes. Strikes mean no work, no pay. Strikes also mean there's no production. No production means there's not economic growth. No economic growth has an effect that people are unemployed, people don't have money, they don't have an income, and this is causing that our standard of living is decreasing. It is also causing that there are no demand for goods and services, which will lead to a negative effect on our businesses. Right, the next one. Remember now, we have done the first one, economic growth. We have done the second one, that was full employment. Now your third one is the inflation rate. Now, we always want in this country to fight the inflation rate as far as possible. Our inflation rate is between 3 and 6%, the target in this country. And you can see with the little photo there that they are fighting inflation because inflation is negative. What is inflation? It's a continuous increase in the price of products over a specific period of time. And we must make sure that the rate of the prices that increase over a specific period of time is as low as possible. Now, it is that we have the inflation rate is relatively high at the moment, and that is because of high electricity prices, high oil prices, and stuff like that. Usually, this inflation rate is expressed at an average rate of the increase of the general price level, as I just said to you. And that is usually done by the consumer price index. Now, the consumer price index is a rate at which we look at the basket, the general basket that a household is spending money on. Now, you can see there that we have their houses, cars, insurance, gas. They also have food, which is important. Over the last few months, the food prices increase relatively at a speed of around about 5 to 8%, and this is causing then also that we have a inflation rate. Now, let's go back there. As I said, it's the consumer price index. What are they doing? They are calculating the increase of the prices of the products that is in the basket of a consumer. And South Africa has an inflation target of 3 to 6%, as I just said to you. Now, if they calculate it, they are going to calculate bread, fruit, vegetables, other food, cars, everything that we spend money on a monthly basis. And then from month to month or 2 months, they are calculating the increase of this basket, the prices. And this give you then your CPI, your consumer price index, which also lead then to your inflation rate. Right. The next indicator that we have is foreign trade. Foreign trade is important to our country because if we have exports, remember we have done exports promotion and import substitution. Exports serve to stimulate employment. In other words, we export to other countries, we produce more, we require more people, we employ more people, and therefore it stimulates our employment. Imports, on the other hand, serve to widen the choice of consumers for stuff that perhaps is not available in the country that we now have available. That is an indication of how the economy is going. Now, what is terms of trade? You have done it in the first term. Terms of trade is the ratio between export prices and import prices. Please don't get confused with the terms of trade and the trade balance. Terms of trade is the ratio between export prices and import prices. Also a very, very good indication of how the economy is doing. Then our exchange rate to different countries. This is important. If the exchange rate is very weak against, say for example, the dollar, then if we import from America, then we are going to pay much more. If it's stronger against the dollar, then it is to our advantage. A change in exchange rate will affect the prices. If we import oil, for example, from another country and our exchange rate is low, very weak, then we are going to pay more for that. And the other way around. If we then have to export to other countries, then we're not going to get that much money. All right, the terms of trade is also indicating whether they are a deteriorating economy or one with import substitution. In other words, that we are not importing that much, we substitute it with locally produced goods. Remember, you have done it last time, ne? Go back to that if you don't understand this properly. Now, the foreign trade also have an effect on our current account balance. If there's a deficit, it means that the country is living beyond its means. We spend more money, that's what's available. Or the country is developing rapidly. Or there's been money granted to us from other countries. Or a surplus can indicate that the economy is strong and that it is competitive with the rest of the world. Right, that was then foreign trade. The next one, which is important here, is our productivity. We're going to look at the productivity of a country, and therefore we are going to see whether the economy is growing and do good or not. Now, if we look at productivity, we look at labor productivity, ne? Laborers. Now you can see the two ends there. I think they are very productive. Now that is what we are striving towards. We want our economy to work very hard to produce more goods and services, which will lead to a higher GDP of the country. Then we are also going to look at the number of workers that's unemployed, the remuneration that these workers are getting, the relationship, as I just said to you, between the wages that they are getting and the productivity. If they get higher wages and produce less, it's going to create inflation. And then employees this will relate to their standard of living. Now, the productivity rate if we look at South Africa, from the 1960s to 2012. In 1960, the average production rate per worker was round about 63,000 Rand per year. In 2012, it increased to 143,000 Rand per year. So there was a growth for the last 45 years of about 127%, which is a good thing. Now, if we look at our production at the moment, our GDP is not increasing at a rate of 3 to 5% or 6%. So our productivity of the country is not what it's supposed to be at the moment. Right. The next economic indicator that we have there is our monetary conditions. Can you remember what does monetary mean? It has to do with the supply of money, which is very important. And if we talk about the supply of money, then we are talking about interest rates. Interest rates, can you remember, not so long ago, the Reserve Bank increased the repo rate with earlier in the year with 0.5. Later on this year, last month or the previous month, it was 2.5%. In other words, for the last few months, there was an increase of 0.75%. Why? Why is the government or the Reserve Bank then increasing the interest rate? Yes, you are right, to fight inflation that is a little bit too high. Now, the monetary conditions has to do with the supply of money. Now, what is the interest rate? What is the normal interest rate? This is the rate paid by borrowers, consumers, that they can borrow money from the commercial banks. So if you go to a bank, you borrow money from a bank, then you are going to pay the interest rate. On the other hand, what is the repo rate? This is the interest rate paid by commercial banks if they borrow money from the Reserve Bank. Remember, the Reserve Bank is the bank of all the banks. And if the commercial banks is borrowing money from the Reserve Bank, they are paying a repo rate. This is important. Now, cash grants is the following one, and the services in kind. This is where we provide for the poor, provision of money to the poor. And this we are doing by means of cash grants and that kind of thing. We all know what that is. Right, this was then your monetary indicator. Now, if we look at our other indicator, we said we're going to do the economic indicators and we're going to do the social indicators. Social indicators has to do with people, us. It has to do with the well-being of each and every one of us in our country. Well-being, it has to do, it's tools that is monitoring identifiable and definable issues related to humans' well-being over a specific period of time. Now, grade 12s, if we look at social indicators, immediately we're going, as we say, going to look at the health of our people. We are also going to look at water supply, sanitation, all that kinds of things that has to do with our standard of living of our country, our health of our country, our well-being, as I just said to you, of the country. It also has to do with nutrition. It has to do with education. It has to do with services that are delivered to us during a specific period of time. Now, there you are. This has to do with South Africa's people. It has to do with the well-being of each and every one of us. Now, the first social indicator that we have there is demographics indicators. this is where we are looking at the total population of the country. Not very long ago, I think they said we have round about 54 million people in South Africa. That shows to us that from 2011, when it was 51 million, to 2013, that was 52 million, and now I think in 2014 is round about 54 million. That shows us that there was an increase in the population. Now, an increase in the population immediately have the effect that it can create that there's a bigger demand for goods and services in the country. It also can create that there is a bigger unemployment rate in this country. Right, the next one that we are going to look at is the birth rate. The birth rate in our country is at the moment, I think, around about 1.8%. The population is growing with 1.8%, of 1.18%, and this must not be higher than the growth rate of the country. Otherwise, we got trouble there. Then we have the death rate. This is the rate at which people are dying in a specific period of time. Dependency rate, dependency mean how many people are depending on people that is earning income. In other words, say for example, we have 20 million people that is working, then we have around about 34 million people that is depending on the 20 million that is working, because all of them must have income, must have food. Now, the next one that we have there is then the health and nutrition. This is a very good indication to us. Does people have access to safe drinking water and sanitation? It sounds funny, it sounds not right to think that there are people that don't have access to drinking water and sanitation. But this is one of the things in South Africa that we are putting a lot of emphasis on so that we can provide this in our country, one of the services. Another one is the number of doctors per 1,000 people in this country. Then the life expectancy and infant mortality rate. Now, the life expectancy of the country is round about 74 years in this country. And that's in the upper middle class income countries. In South Africa, the life expectancy is not so high. It is round about 54 years. And this is because of things like HIV/AIDS, TB, tuberculosis, and malaria, diseases that is coming into the country. And of course also because of perhaps a shortage of health and nutritional services. In South Africa, we have a lot of people that is a little bit overweight. We have people that have malnutrition, that is not getting enough food, that is not getting the right food. And then we have obesity in our country, which is, of course, people that have body index that's more than 30%, more than 30. And that is causing children to be very sick. It can cause diabetes, it can cause death to very young children in our country. So this is something that we must fight as much as possible. Right, there we have it. That is our health services in our country, which is very important. Right, the next one that we have there is education. Now education, you will remember that earlier this year, we listened to the budget speech of the Minister of Finance, the then Mr. Pravin Gordhan, and he allocated a lot of money to social services. And one of the social services that he allocated money to was education. Why? Before you start developing a country, you must get your education system in order. And then you must start educating your people so that they can be educated, literate, and productive. Now, in South Africa, we have the adult literacy rate of our country is increasing now with the introduction of ABET, where we have adults that is studying, and then they can also have access to better jobs, so that they can also study after they have got their matric, etc., etc. It also has to do with the school enrollment in our country. As I just said to you, the country is spending about 20% of its budget on education. Therefore, it is very important that we should have everybody that can go to school must go to school. And then what is important here is the average number of years that people are in school. We must make sure that people are not leaving the school before they have get their matric. As I just said to you, the public expenditure percentage is 20% on education of this country. It is 1/5 of the economy's money. The country's money is going to education. So we must make use of that. We must make sure that we are building a nation which are literate and which are productive. If we look at education compared to other countries, South Africa is spending much more than other countries on education. But we have to, because we have illiteracy rate that is very high in our country. Right. This is then education. The next one is services and housing. People, services, if you look at services, we look at something like electricity, access to refuse removal, that is delivered by the public sector, access to clean water, as I just said to you, which is important health indicator, and then access to sanitation. Right. There you have housing. The government is providing a lot of housing to people in this country, and they are providing it to the previously disadvantaged people. There you can see that these houses are provided with solar energy. It's also provided with telephone lines. So this is some of the services delivered by the government. The first one, as I just said to you, is electricity. Then it is important that there should be a certain amount of people that have access to electricity in this country. And by 2013, about 80% of South Africa's citizens have access to electricity. But there are still a lot of people that don't have access to electricity. What is refuse removal? This is measured as a percentage of the household who have their refuse removed by the municipality on a weekly basis. Then the next one that we have there, water supply. Water supply in the country is very important because we must have clean water, access to clean water, because this can cause that we have sick people if we don't have enough clean water in the country. Then the next one that we have there is sanitation. Sanitation, people, make sure our country that we teach our learners, some from small time, in the small classes, that they have good hygienic manners and stuff, so that we have good sanitation in our country. And then this also has to do with access to toilets with running water, flushing toilets, etc., etc. Now, this was then the electricity. Now, what is urbanization? Urbanization also causes its own problems. People are coming from the rural areas to the towns and the cities, and the population increase in the towns and the cities. this can cause then that the countries, a specific town or city, are overpopulated, which have its own social problems, like overpopulation, like unemployment, like people that is sick, people that don't have access to enough health care, etc., etc. Now, how does urbanization happen? Because of the natural growth rate of the population, babies that are born, people that are dying, migration, people coming from other countries to our country, and it can also be the establishment of new towns in certain areas. This is a very important indicator and show us the allocation and the availability of services to our workers in our country. The next social service or social indicator that we have is the income distribution. Now, can you remember last year in grade 11, we have done the distribution of income in a country, and we do that by means of, which curve are we using? The Phillips curve. That's right. We are using the Phillips curve to tell us the distribution of income in a specific country. Now, income, we are looking at the Gini coefficient. The Gini coefficient is from 0 to 1. If it's nearer to 1, it shows us that the income are uneven distributed in a country. If it's nearer to 0, it shows that we have evenly distributed income in a specific country. Right. Now, how do we look at these things? Income distribution. We look at the head count index. Now, the head count index is an index that is showing us how many people are living on an income less than the poverty line. Poverty line income is income less than about $2 a day. $2 a day is around about 22 Rand. Now, you can think for yourself, what can you buy with $2 a day? Or 22 Rand a day. This is important that this should increase because this is causing that the people have a low living standard. Right. If we look at what we have done today, we have done economic indicators. We also have done social indicators. Economic indicators has to do with it evaluate our economy's performance of a country. Social indicators is evaluating the well-being of the country. Now, how do we compare with other countries? You know what is globalization, eh? Globalization is interaction by means of trade with other countries in the world. Now, there are certain international benchmarks, and this is a process where we examine how countries is performing on a specific aspect, for example, say housing or the income of a country and stuff like that. And the World Bank is doing this. This is a financial institution that is providing loans to developing countries so that they can invest in infrastructure and other development programs to do what? To reduce poverty. Poverty is a very big problem in South Africa and also in other developing countries. And the main reason for poverty is unemployment. And unemployment can be created by a low growth rate of a country. Now, for example, we can compare South Africa with other countries in the same part of the world. We can compare South Africa with countries like the BRICS countries. What is the BRICS countries? This is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And we can compare countries with other countries with our GNI. What is GNI? Gross National Income. Now, the world is dividing countries into 4 basic categories if we look at the GNI of a country. So this is also indicators of how good the country's economy is at the moment. You have a low income country. You have a lower middle income country. You have an upper income country. And you have a high income country. South Africa is classified at the moment as an upper middle income country. And when the world is looking at these indicators, it gives us an idea of how far the country is developed or not. It also gives us an idea how the country is performing. And what is the average income of this specific country. Now, the World Bank have reports of 2011 that they say we had a life expectancy of 55 years in South Africa, and that in the same upper middle income countries it was 74%. This shows us that South Africa is underperforming if we look at the GDP per capita of a specific country. Now, grade 12s, let's quickly revise. We quickly go back to the beginning, and then we are going to show you quickly the rest of our of what we have done today. Now, the first one that we have there was our economic indicators. I said to you that economic indicators has to do with the performance of the economy. That's where we are getting our information, Statistics South Africa, the Reserve Bank, and newspapers. Make sure that you stay up to date with the nowadays economy by reading newspapers and magazines. Now, the first one is gross domestic product, people. This is our growth rate of our country, and that indicates to us whether there's a growth or not. That's one of the main objectives of the government. Then the next one that we have there is full employment. Very important. Make sure that you understand how to work out the number of unemployed people in the country. Now, what can have a negative effect? It's a slow rate in the economy. It can be over unskilled people. It can be because of migration of skilled people. It can be relatively high wages in compared to the productivity of the country. It can be because of strikes, etc., etc. Then, oh, this is a sickness in South Africa, in an inflation rate. Not just in South Africa, all over the world. Right, this is an increase in the general price level, and we must fight it by all means so that it stays between 3 and 6%. How do they calculate it? By looking at the consumer price index, and the consumer price index is calculated by using the average basket of a consumer. The next one is our foreign trade. If we look at the foreign trade, it can show us where the economy is going. Export is stimulating employment, and imports is serving as a wider choice for our consumers. There we have the terms of trade. Remember I said to you, we look at the ratio of export prices to import prices. We're looking at our exchange rate, and we look at things like import substitution and exports promotion. It also can give us, if we look at our current account balance, it can show us that the government or the country is perhaps living beyond its means, or that it is developing rapidly, or that it has been granted credit by other countries to finance imports, or if there's a surplus, it can show that the country is very competitive. Right, the next one that we have is productivity. We must be productive in our country. We look at the number of workers that are unemployed. We look at the remuneration of the workers. And then we look at the employees and their standards of living. The next one is our monetary conditions. This is the supply of money, and it has to to do with the interest rates and the supply of money that will affect prices directly or indirectly. Remember, the interest rate is the rate paid by consumers borrowing money from the commercial bank. The repo rate is the rate paid by commercial banks to the Reserve Bank. Right. Now the one that we all must know very well. You know it every day. You have to do with this every day. The social indicators, which has to do with people and the well-being of our country. The first one is demographic indicators. We look at the population growth rate of a country. We look at the birth rate. We look at the death rate. And we look out at our dependency rates. We look at health and nutrition, access to clean water, access to doctors, our life expectancy of the country, and then in South Africa it's important to consider HIV/AIDS, TB and malaria that is affecting the health of our workers. Right, next one is education. Where you are now, we are looking at the literacy rate of adults. We are looking at the school's enrollment ratio, how many people are going to school, how many people are dropping out before matric, and the total amount of money spent by a country. And I said to you that South Africa is spending 20% of the income on education. Then we're looking at housing and the services. You know that the government is building RDP houses to previously disadvantaged people. They also deliver services like, for example, electricity. We are looking at the percentage of people. They say it's 83% of the population have access to electricity, but it's not enough. The refuse removal once a week, who have access to that, who have access to clean water, and then important sanitation, who have access to good sanitation, flushing toilets, running water, etc., etc. We have urbanization. What is that? That is the increase in the population of the cities and towns. That can give us a good indication of what is happening. What is causing that? It is caused by the natural growth rate, the birth of babies, and the death of people. Migration, people that's coming to the country, people that's leaving the country, and the establishment of new towns. This is an important indicator because it can show to us what we must allocate and whether we have enough available for workers. Next one that we have there is the income distribution in this country. We are looking at the Gini coefficient if we do that from the Phillips curve, and that is from 0 to 1. 1, it's unevenly distributed in the country. In other words, it can say that 20% of the country's people is earning 80% of the country's income, and 80% of the country's people are earning 20% of the income. This is unevenly distributed. What are we looking at? We look at the headcount index. And then we will see that this is a percentage of people that live on an income less than the poverty line income. And the poverty line income, according to the World of the United Nations, is less than $2 a day. Right, grade 12. This is what we have. We have done now economic indicators. We have done social indicators. I want you to please go and study this. They ask it as long questions. Make sure that you study. It is very well in Mind the Gap. If you have access to Mind the Gap, go there, look at the information, go to the internet, make sure that you get the newest information, the newest data, that we don't work with old data in your answers, whatever you are doing. Right. Next time, we will see you, and then we are going to do revision on our question paper. Goodbye.